conversation.
Yeah,
Okay, don't look at the owl.
And look, this is very, very informal. Really appreciate you coming in and spending time to talk with us. I don't want this, it's easy for lawyers to devolve into taking depositions, and I don't want it to be that. I want it to be sort of an open-ended conversation with you about your life and your career, and that's really what we're,
Yeah, I think I can do that.
all about here today. I've got a lawyer thing I've got to take care of. Today is August 24, 2022. And, we are interviewing today, U.S. District Judge Randy Butler, for purposes of our Archives and History Legacy, what I call the Legacy Project. This is on behalf of the Archives and History Committee. But before we start, I just want to formally obtain your permission to conduct the interview and have the interview recorded and transcribed so it can be preserved and edited and released by the Bar Association for viewing by its members and the public. Is that okay?
You have my permission.
Thanks, sir. Very good. Well, good. Well, look, always good in a conversation like this to start at the beginning. So why don't we do that? Tell us where you were born, when you were born, who your parents were, and all
I was born in 1940 in Ridgewood, New Jersey, where my father was a lawyer. He practiced law with his father. My mother was from Mobile, so in 1951, when I was 11, we moved to Mobile. And I went to University Military School, which is the forerunner of UMS Wright, when it was on Dolphin Street, right across from the Math and Science Building.
Okay.
From there, I went to Washington and Lee University.
And I'm a Swanee guy, so we got a.
Oh, yeah. So, went to Washington and Lee under the old 3-3 program, where my junior year in college, I took all my senior required courses, which was economics, my major. So that my senior year, I took all law school, freshman law school. I did law school, but it counted toward my BA degree in economics. So I graduated from W&L in 1962. And back in those days, you were either going to get drafted or you needed to be an ROTC to be an officer. So I did ROTC, spent 2 years in the Army artillery, where if I have a hard time understanding your question, it's because 2 years in the artillery with no earplugs or earmuffs, they didn't allow. I've lost a good bit of my hearing. But anyway, after that, I came back to Mobile in 1966 and started practice with my father's firm, Hamilton, Butler, Denniston, Riddick, and Tarleton.
All right, let's stop right there. We'll pause at the law career. Let's go back. Tell me about your parents. Tell me about your dad and mom.
Well, as I said, he grew up in Ridgewood, New Jersey. His father was a lawyer, and I loved Ridgewood, a wonderful little community. Didn't have a hospital big enough to have a maternity ward. So I was actually born in New York City, 20 minutes away back then. Today it would probably take an hour because, traffic. And had an older sister, and just had a wonderful life in there.
What was your dad's name?
My name without the junior, Charles.
I got you. Okay, and your mom?
Venetia Neville Butler. She was born Venetia Neville Bacon. My grandfather was Robert Bacon, who was in the lumber business.
Okay. And she was from down here.
Well, yeah, right.
Okay. How'd your parents meet?
Mother went to New York for a party with a woman from Mobile who was living in there. In fact, the woman in Mobile was Mobile lawyer T.K. Jackson's aunt, Laura, who at the time was living in New York. And so mother was a friend of Laura's and went to New York to visit her and met my father.
Wow, that's great. And you said you had an older sister. What's her name?
Yeah, Venetia. She was married to the guy, Jack Flynn, who was a real naval archaeologist and historian. He wrote a wonderful book on Battle of Mobile Bay.
I've read it. It's a good book.
West Wind, Flood Tide.
Yeah,
I've read it. He also searched for Clotilda unsuccessfully.
Is that right?
I find it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I read his book. I knew him I read his book, and when I got it, honestly, my expectations were not very, but it was excellent. And I read a ton of history books, and I just thought it was really well done, very impressed. I even got him to autograph a copy for me. Like I said.
In fact, Ben Raines in his book, The Last Slave Ship, mentioned Jack as being one of the people that was looking for the flotillas, along with Mobile lawyer Sid Shell,
Mhm.
who was looking for it,
Mhm.
and hopefully the one of them found it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've often wondered where that ship was myself, and I never undertook to try to find it. So tell me about your boyhood growing up in New Jersey. What did you do for fun as a kid?
Oh,
What kind of
my
trouble
God.
did you get in?
Yeah, it was wonderful. I mean, it was just a peaceful little village. I mean, it really was a village back then. And I had a newspaper route on a bicycle when I was, good gracious, probably 9, 10, and through newspapers in the neighborhood. And I loved to fish and hunt. My father did a little bit, but that's where I got my first feeling for the outdoors, which has been a big part of my life. Conservation, environmentalism, and if we have time, I'll talk a little bit about
Oh, yeah, great. Did you play sports?
up there, not in New Jersey.
Really?
Came here and I ran track.
Okay, at UMS?
Yeah.
Okay.
Went to the state championship and we came in second in the 440 relay. Let's see, was there a lawyer on our relay team? No, there was not a lawyer.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. So your dad and your mom decided to move from New Jersey to Mobile. At that time, you were about, I think you said you were about 11 years old. So how did an 11-year-old boy grew up in New Jersey feel about coming to the deep south?
My sister lost her northern accent on the train, on the car ride from New York to Mobile. And it took me about 2 years to lose my Yankee accent, so I got kidded a lot about it. The thing that brought my father to Mobile, which is really kind of interesting, Tom Hamilton of the old Hamilton Butler firm represented the Quigley family, and Quigley Buick, which is on St. Louis Street. When Mr. Quigley died, Tom Hamilton represented the estate, and then was selling the business. So Tom called my father in New York and said, Charlie, he said, why don't you move to Mobile and buy the Quigley Buick company? My father had no experience. So my father actually submitted a bid to buy Quigley Buick, and he was beat by Ross Grady, and it became Grady Buick.
Yeah.
So it came that close to being Butler Buick, and I wouldn't have been a lawyer probably.
Wow.
I could have been a car salesman.
Wow, that's interesting. So you moved to Mobile and you enrolled at UMS. And of course, back then, University Military School meant what it said. It was a military school. How'd you like it?
Well, yeah, it was great. I got there in the 6th grade and stayed till they moved out. On junior year, we moved to Mobile Street, which is now basically a wonderful prep school. Back then, it was University Military School was, and it's a wonder I got in Washington D.C. because it was not the best preparatory school. It is now.
Yeah.
But yeah, we used to march with all the wooden rifles all the way from the Dolphin Street campus out to Magnolia Cemetery every Lee Jackson Day. Yeah. And stand there in the heat in the Confederate section, which of course today nobody would do, but we would honor the Confederate dead. That was part of the tradition of UMS back at the time.
Right. So when you say the UMS the Dolphin Street campus of UMS back then, that would have been closer to Broad Street back then. Right?
No,
we talking about
math and science didn't.
Oh, right. Okay.
Dolphin Street.
Okay.
If you keep going through that intersection, that's what Cross Street is. Right on the left, with a big couple of vacant lots. Right. University Military School was in a house, an old house, with an extension off the back that was the assembly hall, and below that was the faculty. And
y'all would march from there to Magnolia Cemetery. I bet your uniform was made out of wool too. Wow. So then you said you while at UMS played sports, you ran track.
Yeah, I ran track, and that was basically my thing.
Okay.
Back before they really had a track, we ran on dirt.
All right.
And the high hurdles, the low hurdles, and the leg, and the 440 relays.
I got you. So At UMS, did you make any friends at UMS that you consider lifelong friends?
Yeah, a bunch of them, and I'm the class agent for the class of 58, and of course, we dwindled, our class wasn't but 31 people, I think there's 16 of us left. And, yeah, we kept in touch, and I send stuff to them and hear from them, a good bit of them.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. So you graduated from UMS in 1958 and you go to WNL. What led you to go to a school in Virginia?
Well, my father had gone to Colgate up in Madison, New York, and he kind of wanted me to go to Colgate. But my uncle, Robert Bacon, my mother's brother, had gone to WNL, and just somehow, I don't remember the exact details, but that's where I went. And it was wonderful. It was all male back then. That's not what made it wonderful, but it was so different. It's co-ed now. And my lawyer son Warren was there some years ago. It was the first year it was co-ed. And had a speaking tradition, and you had to wear a coat and tie on campus. If you didn't speak to somebody who was on what was called the assimilation committee, you could be fined. This was a tradition started by Robert E. Lee. And the honor system, I mean, it was a strict honor code, and you did not even consider cheating on an exam, because you get kicked out of school. So it was a wonderful environment.
Yeah, so very similar to Swan.
Yeah,
Right. And
right.
that's strong honor code, code time.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, all male until Swanee didn't go co-ed until right around 1970. Member of any fraternities?
That was Delta Tau Delta, which is not there anymore. Many of the fraternities are gone. Many of them just, dissolved or got kicked off campus in some cases.
So, play sports at the.
I did intramural sport and ran track my first year until I realized that as fast as I was in Mobile, when I went up there, most of the young men who came there, a lot of them were from the Northeast, had real highly tuned athletic programs, whereas UMS really, didn't have any coach. The coach was a teacher of some kind, he wasn't a coach. So I ran 1 year, and I figured, not able to win many races. I said, well, yeah, I'll have something else.
I got that. So, what was your degree in then?
Economics.
Economics, okay, and you graduated in what year?
62.
All right, so that's right on the cusp of the Vietnam conflict.
I was pre-Vietnam era. In fact, I was stationed in Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, when JFK was killed, and when the Gulf of Tonkin incident occurred.
Okay.
And I got an early out from my 2-year commitment in August of 64, because law school started, back in those days, September 15th or something like that. So my wife and I and my son Randy, who's not a lawyer, he's a UPS pilot, drove from Fort Smith straight to Tuscaloosa and studied in law school up there for 2 years. And people who were either in my class, in fact, West Pipes, with the lawyer West Pipes, was my moot court partner. Clay Rankin was in law school, Larry Sims was in law school, Brett Helmson, trying to think that Michael Knight, Paul Cole, and
of course, Donald, a little bit younger than you, I think.
That's right. He came right after McDonald. That's right. Yeah.
So, and all the names you mentioned, all great lawyers here in Mobile over the years, and you formed lifelong friendships with those guys, right? And we'll get to this in a little bit more in a minute. But then you become a judge, and those guys are appearing in the court now. Yeah,
that came about. But let me back up a little bit, Charlie. When I was with Hamilton Butler in the early 60s, the Mobile Bar Association was required to provide lawyers for criminal indigent defendants. There were no public defenders, and there was no system other than a random assignment. Every lawyer in Mobile, whether you were with Hand Arundel, whether you were a tax lawyer, a corporate lawyer, you got assigned from the circuit court judges a criminal case, rape, murder, robbery, And so these lawyers were looking at something they'd never had anything like that before. So the defendants who were indigent, to be fair, weren't getting in very good shape because lawyers, they really know the full spectrum of criminal law. So Tommy Greaves of the old law firm found some money with the Ford Foundation and got the first grant to establish a public defender office in Mobile. It's called the Mobile District Defender Agency. Wayne Loudermilk from the Hand-Down Law Firm, Bob Harper from the old Stover McFadden firm, and I were the public defenders. Wayne headed it up. And so I started trying criminal defendant cases, and that's all we did.
Wow. So did you have your own office?
We had an office over, it was above where Ben Stokes and Brian Gibbons had their office, out just near where the new post office, where the post office is in downtown Mobile. And I had previously gotten criminal law experience as an appointed lawyer with the Hamilton Butler firm when I was assigned a rape case. And I spent more time on that case researching the law, researching the facts. And I went down and tried it, and I won it. It was a not guilty verdict. And when I got back to the office, I was so excited because I hadn't tried it. That the firm, Hamilton Butler, they represented Lloyd's in London. I was doing admiralty work, cargo claims, personal injury on ships. And so the firm and I agreed I would go be an assistant public defender with Wayne and Bob for maybe a year to get some trial experience and come back. Well, I never came back because after spending a couple of years doing that and seeing how ineffective and inefficient the district attorney's office was in Mobile, I cast a personal aspersion for Paul Booth, who'd been in office 27 years, and really the professionalism in the office was just not up to par. So we were getting guilty pleas and acquittals and sentences that were way below what an effective prosecutor should have gotten. I mean, I was trying big cases as a public defender down there, and getting excellent results. So Wayne Loudermilk, the head of the district defender's office, and others convinced me to run for district attorney. I had no plans to do it. So in 1970, I ran as a Republican in strongly Democratic Mobile County with George Wallace on the gubernatorial ticket. And the only other Republican running for local office, a single, was Bert Nevins, who was running for the House. Jack Edwards was on the congressional ticket. And so the election came in November of 70, and I won 42% to 24%. Arthur Outlaw was my campaign chairman for the convention center's name. Former mayor. Yeah. I was at the campaign headquarters one day, early in the morning, out by the loop, and I was just talking to a woman and a man that ran it, and Arthur walks in. Did you know Arthur Outlaw? A little bit, yeah. Very sort of low key kind of guy. He walks in there and he says, "Randy," he said, "what are you doing here?" Just like that. And I said, "Well, Arthur, I just came by to kind of see what was going on." He said, "You don't need to be here. You need to be out in Mobile County shaking every single hand in Mobile County." I said, "Arthur, there's no way I can do that." He looked me right in the eye and he said, "Try." So I did. I went all over Mobile County, shipyards across the bay. I mean, shift changes at stock paper companies, IP. Every time I drive down the road and see any kind of event going on, bowling alleys, back then bowling was a big deal. So I campaigned really hard, got elected, and prosecuted a bunch of cases. Interesting Mobile lawyer story, because I really didn't have a lot of administrative experience. Larry Sims and I had been real good friends. So Hand-Down loaned me Larry Sims for a year, and he became my chief assistant DA. So Larry and I tried cases together, actually a big one. together. And, so I did that. He left, went back to the firm.
Well, what would you say was the biggest, the most notorious case you might have, tried back then?
Well, there was a shooting by of a man, a black man on the street that, Noble Beasley, who was a very, an activist civil rights leader, was driving the car, and there was a passenger in the car had shot and killed this man named T. Ryan on the streets of Mobile. Carl Booth had tried, Beasley, and Beasley was acquitted. Vernon Crawford, the black lawyer, and Jay Cooper, right, his young black assistant, was defending Beasley. So when Larry and I went to office, the co-defendant, the driver, the passenger, was set to trial. And so Larry and I prosecuted Lorenzo Bigpen and convicted him. And so that was a big case. And there were some others, but and that, I did that, Charlie, for I'd say I was really into it, criminal prosecution. I've been in criminal defense, so shifted completely to prosecution. There was a big case, a hurricane damage case that involved the Mobile School Board, where there was fraud in the repairs. The school board somehow falsified the invoices, and some of the higher ups at the school board just reaped tens of thousands of dollars fraudulently, and I prosecuted one of them. And then I got sort of jaded doing all criminal law, public defender, district attorney, and I decided not to run for re-election. And so Charlie Rackett did. He was elected, and my one of the lawyers that I hired, Judge Sullivan, and I went out and practiced law together, and then grew the firm. There were four of us at the time, and some years later merged that firm with what was left of my father's old firm. My father died, Tom Hamilton had died, Bob Denniston was gone, Harry Riddick was just about 100% retired. He was still there, but not elected. And they did a lot of oil and gas work with that firm, and really enjoyed it.
All right, so that's very fascinating history. So in 1988, you are nominated by President Reagan for the federal bench here in Mobile.
Yeah.
So walk us through how all that came to be, how you had that.
It was completely unexpected, and this not when I got nominated, but how that came about. I'm sitting in my office one day, we're on the 15th floor of the old First National Bank building, whatever it's called now, and I get a call from Brevard Hand, who was might have been the chief judge at the time, and Brevard said, "Randy, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, at that moment, I was trying to resolve a fee dispute with a client." And I said, "I'm trying to resolve a fee dispute with a client." He said, "Well, why don't you come over here?" I said, "You mean right now?" He said, "No, come over here and be a district judge." I said, "Are you serious, Brevard?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, can I come over now?" He said, "Yeah, come on over." And that came about because a vacancy was created. Rick Cox had been nominated to the 11th Circuit. And so that vacancy was what I ended up filling. And the nomination process went through, a whole series of background checks, FBI check, and it was a extremely, how should I word it, unusual time to be nominated. Reagan was a Republican. I was nominated in April of '88. He was in his 8th year, and he was going to go out of office the following January. So there were 10 of us from throughout the country, lawyers, and maybe a few state judges, that were nominated to the federal bench. And the Democrats controlled the Senate. Richard Shelby was a Democrat at the time, and Hal Heflin was a Democrat at the time. Well, So immediately there was going to be a problem because the Democrats in Mobile and all over the country, they did not want 10 Reagan nominees to get through that late, particularly since Michael Dukakis came out of the Democratic convention in Atlanta in May with a 14-point lead over George H.W. Bush. So the local Democrats in Mobile, many of them lawyers and others, decided, well, we're going to stop Randy Butler's nomination in its tracks because we want a Dukakis Democratic lawyer, to be the next federal judge. And Heflin, who had, as you may recall, when Jeff was nominated several years before, Heflin did not support Jeff, voted against it, and he was the most Republican voting Democratic senator in the Senate at the time. So he had a lot of Republican money from Mobile in this area, as well as Democratic money. And so when my nomination came up and it was trying to be thwarted, Heflin got a lot of pressure and he pulled it through. And so the 10 of us were confirmed on October 14th of '88, and I was sworn in a few weeks later.
Right. So, did you have an opportunity to meet with President Reagan?
No, it was, he had a habit, not because of me, but he was going to call me and tell me I was being considered. So I knew the call was coming like 2:30 one afternoon. I'm sitting in my office on the 15th floor, and I could look out and see my secretary in the hall. She's probably 20 feet away, and she's sitting there trying to look busy, and I'm in the office, it's 2:20, 2:21, 2:22,
Right.
And at 2:30, she picks up the phone and turns and looks at me and goes, like, so my phone rings, or whatever, and I pick it up, and I say, hello, and it's a woman's voice, and she says, Mr. Butler, can you hold for the president? And I said, look, I'm really busy now, can I call him back later? No, so I talked to him, and this wonderful voice comes on the line. He said, Mr. Butler, he said, this is President Reagan. I've read your background, and there's a vacancy in Mobile, and I've heard some good things about you, and I'd like to nominate you to the district judgeship. And I said, Mr. President, I really appreciate that. And he said, well, I wish you luck. I'll send your name to the Judiciary Committee. And I said, well, because he was getting ready to retire, I said, I'll go out of office. I said, well, I wish you and Nancy the best of luck in your retirement. And that was it.
Wow. Very memorable.
Very memorable.
Yeah. So, we've all seen of late the confirmation process of particularly United States Supreme Court judges. How was that process for you?
Well, it was pretty brutal
Yeah.
because what the Democrats did in Mobile, and I won't name names because there were some lawyers, some alive, maybe some, not many of them still around, who did everything they could to dig up, primarily from my years as district attorney, because we had hundreds of cases in all shades and fashions, of type, and they would pick something out of a case that one of the lawyers might have known about, and in addition to the local resistance, Senator Leahy, who was on the Judiciary Committee, had a staffer who absolutely drove me insane. He would call me every couple of days. Well, Mr. Butler, let me ask you about this, that such and such a case, and here I am. That had been 17 years earlier when I left the office. And I told at the judiciary hearing, I told Senator Leahy, I said, it's kind of like having a telescope and looking through it backwards. When you try to go back and look at 1,000 cases, pick out some little thing. So it twisted and so anyway, it was very stressful, but when the moment came, it was pretty nice. And Charlie, the thing about it is, I knew the minute I was sworn in, I can picture the courtroom scene right now, and all the fanfare and hoopla and packed courtroom with family and friends and judges from all over. Senator Heflin was there and made remarks. Were you there by chance?
Probably was.
You probably forgot about it.
Yeah.
So not there to you.
I've been a lot, I've been to so many, I really know.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But anyway, I could actually say with all sincerity, when I got up to have my remarks, I could tell that this is what I was meant to do. Because it just balanced prosecutors, defense lawyers, civil law,
Right.
you know, and, you know, it just, everything just fell into place. And I loved being in the courtroom as a judge.
All right, we're gonna talk about your judgeship years, here in a moment, but before we do that, let's talk about your family, your wife.
Yeah, Jackie, my wife of 59 years, and as of July, this past July 13th, she was born in Jackson. Her daddy was Dr. Claude Warren.
Jackson, Mississippi or Alabama?
Alabama, I'm sorry. And they moved to Mobile, and she was actually in World War II. He was a frontline surgeon, landed on Omaha Beach, D-Day +2, and went all the way through to the end of the war. And so Jackie has three brothers, two were doctors, one was a priest, and they're all retired now. And so we had our first son, Randy, the UPS pilot, while I was at Fort Chaffee in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and our second son, Warren, here in Mobile.
Okay. And Warren, as most of us knows, a lawyer here practicing with Storms Davis.
Right. He started out with lines, pipes, and
That's
cook.
right.
He and Sadie's lines were real close and
Mhm.
Sadie tired in the old days.
So how as a practicing lawyer and judge, what has it meant to you to have Warren follow your footsteps?
Oh, it's
and
very
take
fun,
practice?
you know, we share stories, and he's got my grandfather's hand scroll license to practice law in New York in his office. And I mean, the thing is huge, but it's all hand scroll, with signed by all the Supreme Court judges in New York. That's in his office. My degree is in his office, you know, it's a good feeling. Yeah.
Mark, good job. We give each other grief all the time.
I'm sure. Well, he's easy to get grief to.
Generation. Who they do
Fourth
fourth
generation lawyer in your family, right?
Well, my grandfather, my father, and Warren. Well, and me.
And you.
I'm in there. I'm in there.
Catch that.
I'm in there.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm the first generation lawyer.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and let me ask you grandchildren. You have grandchildren?
Yeah, we have a granddaughter who just got married this past Saturday, wonderful ceremony in which I participated. A slight quirk of whatever. I was the ring bearer at 82. I did not walk up the aisle with the ring on a pillow. I was sitting on the front row, and Parker, my granddaughter, asked me to present the rings to the pastor, and I did, and it gave me an opportunity, which she wanted me to do, turn to the guests in the beautiful little church. They had a destination wedding in Camden, Maine, and make some comments, and it was one of the highlights of my life.
Sounds lovely. Sounds like more pressure than being a federal
Yeah,
judge.
well, I told everybody, I said, I'm gonna cry, so y'all be
Yeah.
prepared.
Yeah.
And then her younger brother, Warren's son, is a second-year medical student at South Alabama. And then my oldest son, Randy, who's married, has a 14-year-old daughter. She's a freshman at UMS Wright.
Wow. Excellent. Well, okay, so you take the federal bench here in Mobile, Article 3 judge, 1988. You're brand new to the position. What's going through your mind?
Yeah, I inherited Rick Cox's 420 something cases.
Wow.
He had a big backlog. Bless his heart, I loved it. But it took a lot of work and cooperation with all the court personnel and the lawyers, because you know, when I first became a judge, I've been before judges, I've seen them, but actually doing judging, administratively, it just took a while to get used to it, but as long as I could get in the courtroom, I just felt so comfortable in the courtroom, and I just love being in the courtroom, so that's where I wanted to spend most of my life. If a case settled at the last minute and I was all geared up, you know, to try a 2 or 3 day case, I would really be disappointed.
Yeah.
Because I was not what you might call a writing judge. You know, there's some judges that love to pour over, you know, write decisions and, you know, have incredible law clerks that help me.
Yeah, more of a nuts and bolts. kind of-
Yeah, I was much involved.
Yeah, and then in, 2005, you become the presiding, judge.
Yeah, you know, can I share a few
Sure,
things
absolutely.
in between? Yeah, when I was nominated, of course, and served, I became chief judge for a period of about 8.5 years. You're supposed to only do it for 7 years, but Jenny Grenade had just come on, and you have to be a year before you can become chief judge.
Mhm.
So during that time, we had a number of gaps in the judgeship staffing. There's supposed to be 3 district judges in Mobile. Judge Howard got sick, Judge Balmer got sick. There was a period when Judge Howard took a disability early retirement, and there was no other judge. And that's when so there were 2 of us, and Judge Balmer was sick. So there was a period of about over a year.
I remember that.
Yeah, well, I was the only judge.
Mhm.
And, you know, I had just incredible staff help, but I would come in the morning and have a trial set. I'd come in the morning and I'd have a guilty plea and a sentencing at 8:15 until 9 o'clock. I'd start the trial. Sometime I would take the jury a 30-minute break at 10:30, say, and I'd take a plea. And then they come back.
Mhm.
I'd take a half an hour for lunch, take a plea or a sentencing and do that. And, you know, did that for a long time. But again, with the support and the organization that I had, it was just pretty amazing.
Yeah, our court staff here in Mobile, both state and federal, have been excellent over the years.
Yeah. But the one thing I did, Charlie, that, while I was judge internally as chief judge, and I just say this because, you know, it was something that hadn't been done in a long time, ever in that court. We had a vacancy in the clerkship come up. Jack O'Brien, who'd been there 100 years, retired. And so I interviewed a number of people, and I hired the first woman clerk of federal court in the Southern District. And then I hired the first pretrial services female officer. And during that time, I was blessed to be on a number of committees of the 11th Circuit Judicial Council. My first assignment was to be the district judge representative from Alabama to serve on the 11th Circuit Judicial Council, where there was a district judge from the 3 Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. So I did that for a couple of years, was on committees with them. I served on the 11th Circuit Pattern Jury Instruction Committee for both criminal jury instruction, jury charges, and civil jury charges. Then, during this whole period of my active judgeship before I took senior status, I was appointed by Chief Justice Rehnquist to serve on the 11th Circuit, on the Judicial Conference of the United States Criminal Law Committee. There are lots of committees of the Judicial Conference: criminal law, civil law, bankruptcy. Gosh, I can't think of the rest. There's about 10 committees. And one of the more interesting things about the Criminal Law Committee was that when I first went on, the chair of the committee was Mary Ann Trump Barry, Donald Trump's sister. Now, picture Donald Trump with long hair and the same personality, and you have got Mary Ann Trump Barry to a T. She was the most unusual person, very smart, but a lot like her brother. And but she was, I have to say, fun to be around. You might recall that she had been a regular appointee to the district bench, and she later became a Clinton appointee to the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals. Then, when one of Trump's nieces, the deceased brother's daughter, I think her name was Mary, started exposing some internal Trump family shenanigans financially. Mary Ann Trump, Barry, got tied up in that, and she had to resign from the First Circuit. So the next, I guess, meaningful event was when I got a call, as I was on that committee, still active on the criminal law committee, was from the executive director of the administrative office of courts, that Chief Justice Rehnquist had nominated me to be on the executive committee of the Judicial Conference of the United States. And there were like 7 or 8 members, circuit judges and district judges. So I got to be, really involved in that non-judicial, if you will, not judging, right, but the administrative part of the Judicial Conference of the United States, and had some just incredible experiences with those judges and the things we did.
Well, what was Judge Rehnquist like?
He was a quiet guy, sort of shy, really, sort of regimented. I sat at the table with him several times, and at one time, Bavard was getting ready to celebrate his 25th anniversary on the bench here in Mobile. And Rehnquist, you might recall, I think it was the Joffrey case, where the Judge Hand ruled that if you're going to ban religious books, that all this secular
humanism,
they're going to ban them too. And Rehnquist agreed with Bavard. All the other judges here got reversed, he got slammed. So Rehnquist and Bavard sort of had this bond. So I'm sitting at one of the luncheons for the Judicial Conference. I said to the Chief Justice, I said, Chief, I said, Judge Hand is getting ready to celebrate his 25th anniversary on the district bench. Would you be willing to come to Mobile? And we'll have, this Chief Judge, we'll have a ceremony in honor. And he said, I'd be delighted to do it. But he said, I don't fly commercial anymore. I need a private jet. And I said, okay. So without naming names, I called a prominent law firm in Mobile, and they agreed to send a jet to get Chief Justice Rehnquist. Well, somehow the word got out in the courthouse, and Judge Hand called me up to his office one day, and he said, Randy, what is this I hear about you wanting to bring Chief Justice Rehnquist down here? And I said, well, Bavard, I thought it would be a really great idea to do it. He said, don't you dare do it. And I said, okay. I mean, Bavard was, he just didn't want all that hoopla. And I thought it would be a kind of a neat thing to do for him, but he didn't. So anyway, one other thing I did in that regard, and I'll leave that pretty much. The Judicial Conference had a long-range planning committee that was set up to plan long range for what the courts would expect. And I chaired that for a year in Washington. And I think the biggest event that probably ever happened to me while being on the Judicial Conference, I'll set the stage for you. We were in the gathering room of the Judicial Conference, and Chief Justice Rehnquist is the middle head of the table like this, and there are 11 circuits. So there's a district judge, circuit judge, district, so it starts district 1, starts 2, I guess, and goes all around the circle. And I'm 2 seats from Chief Justice Rehnquist. And the meeting is being conducted. Jeff Sessions comes in, he's on the Senate Judiciary Committee, makes some remarks and comments. And Chief Justice Rehnquist's staff assistant walks in and whispers in his ear. And he kind of looks up, and then he goes back. He's a very regimented guy, keeps going to the meeting. And then one of the other congressmen, can't remember his name, who was on the House Judiciary Committee, was making his comments. And he said, I've just heard that a plane has crashed into one of the Twin Towers. And we all kind of think, oh man, that's a shame. Some small plane is sitting on the tower by accident. Well, not more than 3 or 4 minutes, and we're all sitting in a room. There's a courtyard out to one side, And that courtyard faces the Pentagon building, and we're sitting there, and we all hear at the same instant, boom! And we turn, everybody turns towards the courtyard, looking in the direction of the Pentagon. And what we had heard was the plane hit the Pentagon. And her name was Sally Ryder. Sally Ryder comes rushing back in, and the Chief Justice gets the word. He looks up and he says, "A second plane has just hit the towers. We are evacuating the building immediately, and we'll reconvene at 9 o'clock in the morning." And him thinking, what? We think it, so we go pouring out of the Supreme Court building. And, you know, the plane, of course, they hit the towers, which would represent business. They hit the Pentagon, which represented military. And everybody's pretty sure that the third plane that crashed in Pennsylvania was the people that forced it down, was going to crash into Congress, into the Capitol building, because the Senate and the House were in session. And it was, as we all rushed out on the street, the Supreme Court building was probably 150 yards behind the Capitol. So what we might have witnessed would have been horrendous. So as we go piling out on the street, every single person, and there were thousands coming out of every government building, had their cell phones up, and I had mine, no signal. And we rushed down to the administrative office of court building, and there's a cellar. We go down in the cellar, and of course, everything they would see on the television was heartbroken, you know, with what we see. And replayed over and over and over again. So when we emerged to go back to our hotel, have you been to Washington?
Sure.
What's the train station right there? You know, where the trains all come together. Something anyway.
Grand Central, lesson.
Yeah, it was packed. You know, usually the taxi cabs everywhere, cars. We emerged about an hour and a half later. The streets were vacant. Sirens whistling by the White House a little bit. So we had to walk back to our hotel. And we go all the way back to our hotel. Took about an hour and a half. And there are no cars, there are no flights. Can't get out of Washington. So luckily, I was real good friends with the judge on the judicial conference in another district, who lived in West Virginia. So we drive out of, we go through Georgetown, across the Key Bridge, and drive straight towards the Pentagon. Crystal clear, gorgeous September day. And there's this giant billow of smoke pouring out of the Pentagon. And as we head south on the interstate, or west, you know, the interstate's like 8 lanes each way that part of Washington, with zero traffic coming to Washington. The most bizarre thing I've ever seen. And the traffic by then going out of Washington was minimal. So we get to West Virginia, get a little hunting camp. We stop there outside of Charleston, West Virginia. I think that's what it's called.
There is a Charleston.
Yeah, that's the capital. That's where he's at. We go into Charleston, spend the night in this cabin, get up the next morning. The sky is gorgeous, not a single airplane in the sky around. It's really strange. We go to his office, no rental cars, no airplane. So his marshal, his U.S. Marshal, called the Mobile U.S. Marshal. And they decide to take me, start me south. Mobile Marshal will come from the north and we'll rendezvous wherever. We rendezvous in Bristol, Virginia, or Bristol, Tennessee, together right there together, same town. And I get in, and back then I had what was it called? The very first little thing you could, they had a pen and you could type on.
Yeah, BlackBerry.
Well, it wasn't a BlackBerry. It was so, anyway, so I sat in the back seat of the car. So they said, "You want to spend the night here, Judge?" It was like, I don't know, 8 o'clock at night. I said, "No, I want to get home." By then I talked to Jackie at home, my wife. And so I type out in the back seat my observations about this whole thing. When I get back, my job as the 11th Circuit representative was to send a report to all the judges in the circuit about, you know, the routine, you know, what went on at the conference and voted on what was passed. So I wrote this long story about, it was called inside the Supreme Court building, the day the world changed. And anyway, that was,
Has that been published anywhere?
you know,
I need to find that. And
yeah, I've got it.
tweak it and.
I've got it's framed. Chuck DR of Public Court may have a copy of it, but it was circulated among every judge in the circuit. They all read it. So
Powerful stuff.
yeah, powerful stuff.
Okay, so you are the chief judge, and then you reach a point where you take senior status, and then ultimately you retire.
Yeah, about 9 years ago.
About 9 years ago. So do you still get called over to help out now?
No, Charlie, when I took senior status at age 65, I'm now 82. I had just about tried as many cases as I really wanted to try. And so Christy Dubose had been appointed by Reagan. And again, Jeff Sessions was responsible for the 3 judges that were active at the time: Jenny Renee, Bill Steele, and Christy Dubose. And so I was willing to give Christy just about my whole docket. So I maintained an active docket, but I didn't try cases anymore. And so I did that from the time I was 65 to 9 years ago, 73, I guess, yeah. And then I just decided, you know, I don't really need to be doing this anymore. There's life on the other side. And my wife said, look, you're not ever going to be able to quit. You know, you love it too much. And I said, well, watch me. And people say, do you want to go back? Do you miss it at all? And I have to be honest, I really don't. I have such a complete life without it. And, you know, the sooner you can retire, let me tell you, you know, there's a whole other world out there. And I do so much other stuff, you know.
Well, over the course of your very long career, in the particularly in the courtroom, as a civil lawyer, a criminal defense lawyer, prosecutor, and judge, seen a lot of lawyers come and go. How would you rate the lawyers who generally practice in the courts here in Mobile?
You know what changed over time was civility. And back in the days of when Tom Hamilton, you know, my father practiced law, everything was your word was your bond. You know, you didn't worry. Lawyers were not they might have been contentious in the sense of arguing the law in a motion or in court, but none of the stuff that goes on today. So that's changed a lot. And not that I saw it so much in the courtroom, because you know the lawyers were pretty composed in the courtroom, but all those stories I hear about what goes on outside the courtroom are really, you know, they're really discouraging to me. But anyway, so I've seen a lot of changes, yeah.
Any particular case that you presided over as a district court judge sticking in mind?
Well, lots of them. I mean, you know, I tried the case where Lambert Mims and others were indicted for mail fraud, but basically for a scheme to defraud a man who developed a method to take the garbage in Mobile, burn it to steam, and sell the steam to Degussa, which was in existence back then.
And they were former city.
Yeah, he was
commissioner.
He was a city commissioner.
Right.
And he was the public work commissioner. And tried that case, and then the major drug cases. Good gracious, Reagan, you know, he had a really tough on crime policy, and Jeff Sessions was part of that. And so we had these huge multi-defendant drug cases. I mean, it wasn't unusual for me to try at the same time 5, 10, even a dozen defendants at the same time with multiple lawyers. And you know, I love that sort of thing. But let me go back a minute to my private practice. I think one of the maybe the funniest cases as a lawyer when I was in private practice after the DA was the JC for sponsor the rodeo every year. And this was gosh, it would have been back in the late seventies, maybe early eighties, they had a mystery fish. And if you caught the mystery fish, you would win $50,000. Lloyd's in London insured it. So I'm at some kind of wildlife meeting. I've had a lot of involvement with Ducks Unlimited, Mobile County Wildlife, all sorts of environmental groups. And a man comes up to me and said, introduced me to this man. He said, hey, Mr. Randy, this is so-and-so. He won the mystery fish, the $50,000 prize, but they don't want to pay me. And I said, well, what's that all about? So the Lloyd's of London hired, I don't want to name the name, but I could be wrong, one of the top firms in Mobile, and they filed, I guess, a declaratory judgment action to try to prove that there was, well, here's what the issue was. The problem was the man who tagged the mystery fish, which was a speckled trout, was best friends with the guy who caught it. And so my client who caught it was facing, and we tried it before it got to Mobile. And after a day and a half of trial, there was not enough evidence to deny the payment. So $50,000, okay, I'm thinking this is back, in the late 70s, pretty good. And I'm thinking, man, I'm gonna get a nice fee. So as the judgment was announced, the circuit judge, whoever it was handed something by somebody, and they said, well, this is interesting. He said, here's a garnishment from his ex-wife. He, the plaintiff, my client, has not paid child support or alimony for 11 years. He owes, it was like $40,000. So I got a tiny little fee out of what was left over. So anyway, and then I did, when I was district attorney, one of the other really interesting cases I had, Alcoa Aluminum, which had closed their plant by then. It was on the west side of the Mobile River. On the east side, they had these huge dikes of the alumina bauxite residue after they'd extracted the aluminum, and it was leaking into Polecat Bay. So Bob Adams represented Alcoa, and I, as DA and as a lawyer, caused them to reach an agreement that they would spend $1 million protecting the seepage from those dikes by putting a ditch all around the bottom of it so it didn't further contaminate Polecat Bay. And so that, those kind of cases as a civil lawyer, well, as DA, but.
Let me ask you this, I don't want the conversation to evolve into a political discussion. Things nowadays are so acrimonious and divided, but let me just get your thoughts on that. What are your views on the direction of the law these days and over the time that you've seen it?
Well, I've been it's been about 9 years since I've been hands-on. Direction of the law, one of the things I think has happened is, particularly today, government tries to fix too many problems. They pass too many laws. They pass too many, let's try to fix it with money. And that's not the kind of practice we as lawyers and you as lawyers see every day. But, it just sort of strikes me that we've gone way beyond what the founders wanted us to do. But in terms of the practice of law, as I say, I've been away from it for so long, Charlotte.
Yeah. So is there anything else about your career, about the courts, the profession that come to mind that you sort of like to leave the viewers of this?
I think we've pretty much covered the gambit of what I've done in my career. We could talk about individual cases all day.
Why don't we wrap it up on this? What gratitude do you have in terms of your life and career in practice?
What gratitude? Well, I thank God every day for putting me in the position He put me in. I know it was a God thing. I'm convinced of that. I tried everything, I did everything else in the spectrum of legal practice. And when this came to me, and I felt that, I alluded to it earlier in the interview, that day, when I was in the courtroom being sworn in, I could tell that that's where God intended me to be, and I knew it, and I know it to this day. And so it was a wonderful part of my life. As I said earlier, the part of my life I'm in now is equally as wonderful, if not better, but in a totally different way. Family, friends, different groups I'm involved in. And one thing I didn't mention, I've been involved since for 9 years in a racial reconciliation group that 6 of us started. One of them was Jay York, current circuit judge. Jay and I and 3 black pastors and a minister went to Mississippi to borrow from them the Mission Mississippi program that they've had for years over there to encourage racial reconciliation. And the group we formed in Mobile is called the Pledge Group, and I'm still active in it. And we've done, we've had some incredible gatherings of leaders in the black and white community over the years to try to restore broken racial relations.
I would like to get more information about that for myself.
Yeah.
So maybe after this, we can.
And
talk.
I've been involved. One of the members of the pledge group is Ed Litton, who for a year was the head of the Southern Baptist Convention. And you talk about a powerhouse in racial reconciliation. I mean, he has really led the way with his church, which is the Redemption Church. It was Northside Baptist Church out on the University of Mobile. So that, my heart is in things like that now, and not the law.
Sure. Well, that's
And
one.
family.
Well, look, for the record, I'm Charlie Potts. I want to thank you so much, Judge Butler, for coming in and speaking with me on this legacy project. It's my honor and privilege to spend this time with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mine too.
Yeah.
Thank you.